kick things off.
Hey.
Hi.
Hello.
Representative. We've had an interesting day at the Capitol.
We really have. So I am coming to you live from the car, and I appreciate your patience. It was quite the afternoon.
We appreciate you guys taking your time to be with us today. I'm so excited. And welcome everyone in. It's 7 p.m. We'll get started because I know our panelists today have a lot going on. I want to make sure we use their time as best as we absolutely can. For all of my friends at home who don't know me, I am Chris Corrigan. I am your Adult Programs Coordinator from the Schaumburg Library, and in partnership with the League of Women Voters of the Palatine Area, I am happy to bring you another session of our Civic Awareness Series, which happens on the second Tuesday of the month from 7 to 8 p.m. Currently virtual, but once our library renovation is done, we'll be bringing this to you in a hybrid format. And I can't wait to hang out with Terry and Janet and the rest of the league in person at the library when we get to that wonderful day. Speaking of, this is the league president, Kathy. But before I turn things over to the league and our panelists, just a couple friendly Zoom reminders. First off, your cameras and microphones have been turned off. If at any point during today's program you're having a technical difficulty, please reach out to me using the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar. That's the best way to get specifically one-on-one with me so I can help you with any issues you might be having. That's also the best place to put any questions you might have for our wonderful panelists this evening that the league will be fielding at the end of the program. Don't hesitate to put them in the Q&A as you think of them so you don't forget them later. We've also enabled closed captions for your convenience, and you can turn those on or off as you wish using your Zoom toolbar. Without further ado, I'm going to turn things over to my friend Terry from the League of Women Voters, and she is going to introduce tonight's panelists. Take it away, Terry.
Hey, thanks, Chris. Hello, my name's Terry Gazowski, League of Women Voters Palatine Area Co-Events Director, with my partner, Janet Sonoika, who will also be leading this session. Thank you also, Schaumburg Library and Chris, in partnering with the League, again, on the Civic Awareness Series. A little bit about the League. It's a nonpartisan political organization. Anyone can join or support the League in our mission of promoting civic engagement, voter education, and advocacy on various issues. You can learn more about the League and participation through the website that we'll be putting in the chat, as well as where to go to vote this month. We are over 100 years old, but welcome the energy of all ages and genders. Now, in the spirit of Women's Month, we welcome our panelists in representing our session topic of women in politics. And we'll start out with a brief intro and roles of our honored guest, former Lieutenant Governor Evelyn Sanguinetti, State Senator Laura Murphy, and State Representative Mary Beth Canty. While Janet kicks us off, we'll also post additional bio websites in the chat. Welcome.
Thank you.
Yes, thank you, Terry, for the intro, and Chris, and thank you so much for the three of you coming to discuss women in politics today, and you know, in the future of politics in general. We appreciate your time and your talents, especially amongst these very hectic days. We do really appreciate you all coming out here virtually to speak and answer the league questions, and as well as any participant questions. I know Chris did mention in the Q&A that you guys can, if you have any issues, you can post there, but please also, if you have any questions for our panelists, do put those in the Q&A as well. For just to kick things off, if all three of you could just kind of give a brief background of what your role is as, you know, Lieutenant Governor, State Senator, and State Representative. Evelyn, if you are, sorry, Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, could you get us started?
Well, thank you so much for having us, by the way. This is so just so you folks know, I'm part of the board of the Wheaton League of Women Voters. So I'm a big fan and just super humbled to be invited. So really quick on the lieutenant governor's role, it's very different from state to state. And some states don't even have a lieutenant governor at all. Did you know that? So in the state of Illinois, that's the first thing I did when I joined forces with our former governor. I researched what my statutory duties were in the state of Illinois. And so the first one was Rural Affairs Council. The second one was Waterways, Three Rivers Council. And then my favorite one was Rural Affairs Council. Now, I'll have you know that I did not have a background in science, nor did I have a rural background nor did I serve in the military, but my legal skills helped me to solve those problems and help the good people of Illinois. So that's a great question because it's different in every state.
Great, thank you. Senator Laura Murphy.
Well, thanks. I too want to join and echo my thanks for having us this evening. And I have to put a plug in to my Schaumburg District Library. I have the pleasure of representing Schaumburg, and it is the best district library in my district. And I have more than one. So I often make comparisons and ask people to look at what Schaumburg does. So I appreciate all the work that you do there, and thank you for that. So I have been in the General Assembly for 8 years now. I grew up mostly in Park Ridge, and I represent that community as well as Niles, Des Plaines, Elk Grove, Schaumburg, Little Hanover, and a little of Roselle. I currently serve as an assistant majority leader, and I get to be involved at the table where really a lot of the leadership and decisions are made at the Senate level. I always knew that something was missing amongst the rank and file. And now when you get to be at the table, you can appreciate, having a role in making those decisions. So I'm happy to have a discussion on whatever areas that you want. I serve, my only committee that I chair is executive appointments. So anyone that is required to have gubernatorial appointments then runs through that committee. And I serve on a host of other committees wherever they needed someone, they plugged me in, and from appropriations down to public health. Thank you.
Great, wonderful, thank you. And then Representative Mary Beth Canty.
Hi there, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yeah.
Perfect. Just wanted to make sure. So I am State Rep Mary Beth Canty. I was sworn in last year, so January of 2023. So I am the shortest serving member of the government on this esteemed panel, and I'm really grateful to be included. Laura is somebody that I have known for several years, even before I got elected, and I've really looked up to her and the work that she's done. So it's been really fun to actually be in the legislature with her. As a new legislator in the House side, I think it's a little bit different from what Laura has described. So she gets to lead a committee. She gets to be in on a lot of leadership positions and discussions. As a newer member, you're still somewhat finding your way and you have to make a name for yourself. I think one of the things that I try to focus on is building my reputation as somebody who works hard, is willing to listen, is willing to see multiple viewpoints, and is always going to be transparent and honest with the things that I say. So if I don't like a bill, I'm going to be forthright about that if I have a tough position. And I think watching people that have come before me that I look up to, that's the way that they operate as well. And so I think that's the key. One of the things people say in Springfield is that your word is your bond. And so if you have nothing else, if you don't have the same level of expertise or education or anything else, at least you have your word. And as long as people can trust your word and what you say, you can do really well here. So I serve on 6 different committees. I asked for 8, but I only got 6. And that's probably, I see Laura laughing, and it's probably the right call that I only got 6, because it's a lot of work to read through all of these bills. We filed, between the House and the Senate, we filed about 6,000 bills in 2023. And then additional bills got filed this year. So there's a lot going on. You want to make sure that you're reading as many as you can, but definitely the ones that you are running, you want to know backwards and forwards. The ones that are going to come before your committee, you want to know those really well too. And so the more committees that you serve on, the more work there is from that regard. But I'm having a great time. I think I've worked on some pretty good bills that we were able to get done last year, and I hope to continue that same thing going forward.
Great, well put. Thank you so much, everybody. Now that we've got a little bit more of a background on each of your day-to-day, I was hoping we could dig a little bit deeper on some more questions about your experiences as politicians, and more specifically as women in politics, the good, the bad, the ugly, and everything in between. So Just to kind of kick things off in that regard, if each of you could elaborate a little bit more about what motivated you to step up and become a leader in politics. Laura, I know you touched on this briefly with your intro, but if you could go a little bit more in depth of what that decision moment was like when you realized that it needed to be specifically in these leadership roles. And this time, if we want to start with Laura Murphy.
Oh, sure. So I came from local government. And so my first entree into an elected office was I had run because, someone and my mother was a big encouragement. And they're like, you got to run for office, blah, blah, blah. And, you're young. And I'm like, oh, I was young and dumb, I like to say. And I didn't know any better because had I known better, I never would have done it. So that was over 20 years ago. I made my first run for office. I was not successful, but I met so many great people along the way. Then fast forward probably 10 years, I am now living in Des Plaines in my home community now. And a bunch of neighbors came up to me and said, we watched you, you have to run for alderman. So I thought, well, why not? Because I always have believed that you can either be a part of the change or you can complain about the change and have no input into it. So I always like to have input into the decisions that impacted my life. And I then kind of got hooked, frankly. I served as an alderman in Des Plaines for 8 years. We have term limits in Des Plaines, unlike a lot of other communities in the northwest suburbs. But so you were term limited, and that was just a nice way to go out. And then this opportunity about 10 years later presented itself. And I just thought, well, yeah, what a great opportunity that is presented. And that's kind of how I just kind of accidentally fell into it and then fell in love with it.
Oh, that's great. I think we all know a lot of people who fall into the doer or complainer category.
Yeah.
Excellent. On to you, Representative Canty.
I always love this question because I never thought that I would go into politics or that I would be in elected office. The only time I had ever run before I ran for trustee in 2019 was when I was a junior in high school and I lost our theater board elections, and it was a devastating loss. So when I was 17, so to have me come back many, many moons later and run for trustee in Arlington Heights was a big deal. But for me, it started with affordable housing because I'm a lawyer. My husband is a chemist. And I was looking around our community. We were thinking we might want a bigger home. And I started to notice that a lot of the more affordable homes in our community had been purchased by developers and torn down, and then huge and expensive homes were put up. And don't get me wrong, they're beautiful. But I started to get really worried that if we, as two working professionals, were feeling like we couldn't afford to stay in our community, what was it like for other people who weren't in our same position, who didn't have the luck that we had with our careers? And so it really prompted me to want to get more involved in the community. I had done, PTA and league. I was actually on the board of our local League of Women Voters. And so it presented itself and I said, I'm going to run. So I did that. I served as a village trustee in Arlington Heights for 4 years and I loved it. I feel like I got to help influence things in my community for the better. And I think that's what we should all be looking to do. How can we make a change? And just like Senator Murphy said, you can either complain about what's happening around you, or you can get up and try and do something. And I'll add to that for women, studies have shown, and I'm sure you've seen this, Janet, that women have to be asked to run for office about 7 times before they will do it. And I think that's true in a lot of regards. I think women tend to believe that we need to be overqualified before we can take on a role. And there's nothing wrong with being overqualified, but I always say, let me be the first one to ask you to run for office, whether it's being on your local library board or your school board, local, state races, federal races. Just consider running for office because we need a lot of different voices.
No, that's great. Excellent. So it sounds like, a specific cause that asking, I actually haven't heard that specific statistic. That's very interesting and not that surprising based on what I've heard of some people's stories. So Thank you very much. Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti.
Thank you. Along with that statistic that is out there, Representative Canty, there's also another statistic that speaks to the reason why we also run, right? Women run because it's just so fundamental, so intrinsic. And that's why you see a lot of women running for school board, because our children are in school. It's just so, it's so intrinsic to us. So the reason why I decided to run as a Latina woman was very, very different. I had an accident on city property, and subsequent tests revealed that I had multiple sclerosis, and I was already a practicing attorney, and I was sad because I was like, oh my gosh, I pay so much in taxes so that I could get on the sidewalks, and now I may not ever be able to practice law again. I may never be able to do anything. And I mourned for myself for a while until my husband said, well, you either get busy dying or you get busy living. And there's an opportunity in the city. And it's great that Senator Murphy also comes from local government, because that's where I come from too. But my husband said it's either you get busy living or you get busy dying. There is an excellent opportunity for you to run for city council so that you could reach out to your neighbors and talk about your philosophy of government. And when I was able to walk, I started going door to door to talk about my philosophy of government. And ultimately, when I was sworn in as a city council member in Wheaton, I was called the sidewalk lady because it was just so intrinsic to me. I had an awful accident on a sidewalk, and I wanted to make sure that everyone that was on our sidewalks were able to go to restaurants, were able to shop, were able to get on the train to go to the city and work like I did, and not face such a horrific accident. So that's what got me started. And ultimately, after that, I'm a Republican. And so people in our party started saying, hey, Evelyn, we heard you spoke Spanish. And I said, well, yeah, well, hello, it's my first language. My mom is Cuban, my dad's Ecuadorian. And then they said, well, what about getting out there and getting more minorities to run? And I thought that was excellent. And so that was a big project for me. And then I also wanted more women to run because I saw that a lot of women had the big Rolodex. And for you young people, it means your big phone book, wherever you keep it, right? But we were always the ones to put these parties together and everything to support our male counterparts. So my big mission was to also encourage women to run, right? And then I was noticed by a gentleman that was running for governor, and that's how it went. And so I went from councilwoman to the first Latina lieutenant governor in the whole country. So if there's anything that I could convey to all of you out there is you got to fake it until you make it, because I was scared at the beginning, but it worked out, and it's so important for us to all have a voice and put ourselves out there to fill all these slots in from local government all the way to state.
Excellent, thank you. Yeah, that's wonderful. Turning a personal tragedy into action. That's fantastic. Yeah. Thank you for sharing. Which you guys all kind of intrinsically touched on this this point of next generation and getting people involved. What advice would you give the next generation of political leaders or people you're trying to bring into the fold here? I know you said fake it till you make it is certainly a good one in any field. But is there any other specific advice that you would give to anybody who's interested or is politically curious in that type of a career? Representative Canty, if you want to start on this one.
Yeah, happy to. I would tell people to start getting involved now, right? The best way to learn whatever it is that you're trying to do is to be a part of it as much as you're able. So when I was thinking of running for trustee, I actually started going to village board meetings for the 2 years before I ran. And I was there every time that the village board met because I wanted to understand the work that they did and how the meetings functioned and et cetera. So you don't have to necessarily go that far, but I would say get involved. If you're thinking about running for alderman, meet the aldermen in your community. If you're thinking of running for village board, for school board, meet them, talk to them, help people on their campaigns, get to understand the issues as best you can before you get there. And then don't be afraid to admit once you do get the job, because you will eventually get it. Don't be afraid to admit that you are not the expert in the room and ask questions. Ask as many questions as you can. I am always the first to raise my hand and say, I don't understand this. I'm new here. Can somebody walk me through it? Because I think when we've been doing something for so long, and I'm an attorney by training and trade, so I'm used to being surrounded by experts in any case that I'm working on, and I have to ask them questions. But I think we get used to needing to know everything. I think that's a trait that we have, and you don't. And it's not a shameful thing to ask questions. It actually makes you stronger in the job.
Great, thank you. Back to you, Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, if you want to add a little bit more advice to fake it till you make it, or not, we could leave it there too.
Well, my advice, because when I got started, you always hear the saying in our party about bringing water to the elephant, which translates into Spanish, ¿qué has hecho? English, what have you done, right? And so before I even thought to run for anything, I was always in the community, doing things for the community, such that when I put my hat in the ring, all of my counterparts in my party knew that I had really brought water to the elephant, right? And I did so in the way of trying to organize women's groups. I did so in the way of trying to organize Latino groups and also trying to get into the schools. In other words, doing your work before you get out there and ask people to support you and go door to door for you. So my fundamental advice is think about what you've done before you ask to run and ask people for support.
Great, thank you. And then Senator Laura Murphy, if you want to add, I know you said before, had you known better, you would not have gotten involved, but now you know a lot. And what would you tell somebody who's maybe in the same position as you were when you first started? Any advice for that?
Right. And so if someone would have told the younger me this too, it would have been helpful. But I think we have to recognize that women are problem solvers. And we take that skill in our everyday lives and we have to implement that and do all kinds of things in our family structure. And that can equate to any other structure that we're involved in. My career was, because for 30 years I had a career, as aldermen in the suburbs are not like the city of Chicago. You spend that pay on babysitters the first month. So it's not like you can just, have that is your only career. So I was always in mid-level management. And I am old. So I started when women were just coming into the boardroom and we had to work harder. And I think that just is ingrained to us, that we always know that we have to work harder. I think it's not as bad now as it used to be, but we had to make sure that we were always on our game to be respected the same way a man's opinion was. And so I come from that perspective, and I know that we work hard, we problem solve, and we bring answers to the table. And those are the only skills you need to help make changes in your community. So I would encourage any woman to say, you already have those skills, believe in yourself.
Great, thank you. That's well put. So I guess that brings us then to, throughout your political career, have you found any specific barriers that were specific to being a woman in politics, or on a lighter note, maybe any specific assets you've had. You all kind of touched on some of the skill sets you have as a woman has really helped you in your political career, but have you found that there are any barriers and how have you overcome them? If anybody can touch on that a little bit, if we can start with you, Governor Sanguinetti.
Well, I'm going to start with the assets because when I decided to run for the Wheaton City Council and decided to go door to door initially, and I remember that there was such a difference because my husband also went door to door to advocate for people running for office. And anytime he went door to door, neighbors would be like, "Hi, Ray. Yeah, leave your literature at the door. We'll get there, right?" But I did realize that something magical does happen when women go door to door and women advocate. And what's different about us is that we disarm, right? And we just bring a different spirit, such that when I went door to door, doors would open and moms would say, "Hey, why don't you come with me to the PTA meeting? Why don't you come with me to church?" Or they'd invite me inside. And it's the whole element of woman disarming, right? And I believe that that is a huge asset that we have when we advocate for other candidates as well as we advocate for ourselves. As far as barriers, I believe that Senator Laura Murphy hit it right there, which is, Senator, you mentioned that we got to work harder. I always think we always have to work twice as hard to get what we needed. I mean, starting off, I'm an attorney by trade as well. And I remember starting off in the courtroom, they thought that I was a courtroom interpreter or the stenographer or the court reporter or whatever. At no point in time when I got started being an attorney did they think that I was an attorney, right? And so that is the big barrier that we face. And even still now, we see more women getting into office, but we are still at a disadvantage statistically. So there you have your barriers and your assets, but I did start with a positive, Janet.
That's a good foot to start on. And then over to you, Representative Canty.
Yeah, I echo what my colleagues have said. For me, I have young kids. So my oldest is 13. I have two kids. My oldest is 13. My youngest is 10. For a lot of their lives, I've been a candidate or an office holder, and that's really exciting. But as a woman, I get asked a lot and have since I started running for office, "Oh, what's going to happen with your kids? Who's going to take care of your kids?" And so trying to help people understand that my kids have a father and their father is fully capable of remembering to pack the lunch and to do the hair and to remind everybody to brush their teeth. He's fully capable. He is an adult and he is well positioned to handle all of these things, but trying to soothe people's concerns about who would take care of my kids while I was trying to take care of the community. That's always been a little bit of a challenge. It was when I started having my kids when I was practicing law. It continues to be as I take office. But I think to that same point, having my kids helps people see me in a different way. I am used to having to bounce from thing to thing, right? You're 1 second this, powerful attorney and you're negotiating things, and the next minute you're reminding your kids to brush their teeth and you're asking them, "Did you scrub out the lunchbox?" Right? You're having to go back and forth, and now you're paying attention to the spelling test, and then over here you've got the karate class. So having to balance all of these things has come in really handy being in Springfield, because we are constantly pulled in different directions. You have to change priorities on a dime. Senator Murphy can tell you, we had a lockdown today and it threw everybody's schedule off this afternoon. Committees going late, meetings are starting late, but not all of them. So you have to be ready to pivot on a dime, right? And I think that comes in very handy. So I would say, having kids, for some people that can be seen as something that might be a limiting factor or something that they're going to be worried about. So you're going to have to overcome that to a certain extent as a candidate. but it can be a plus for you as well. My kids love politics. They are so involved and concerned about civic issues. They've both run for student office in their elementary school. So being able to be a role model and show them you can do more than one thing and you can make a difference no matter how big or how small has been really powerful as well. But I think having kids can be both a blessing and a curse sometimes in this industry.
No, that's great. Yeah, we did not put any of those questions of how your kids are doing on today's Gambit, so no worries there. And certainly based on what everybody's kind of been saying is one of the things that gets individuals involved is their connection to the community. And very often that is your kids. That is why you want to be on the school board, and that's why you care. So that's great. And I mean, taking care of your community is taking care of your kids. Your kids are part of the community. So anyway, that's very, yes. Excellent. And then Senator Laura Murphy, if you want to add.
Well, I have to agree with both Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti and Representative Canty, and just add that, you know, we learn to balance. And there's going to be days that you're balancing and juggling all these things, and your spouse, who is so supportive, will still ask, and what's for dinner? And you know, you've been out, but you just learn to balance all those things. And most importantly, I think we have to keep our sense of humor, because we can't do everything, but we can do enough that it makes it important. And that's what I think, that we are sometimes the hardest on ourselves, and our expectations that we have to deliver this perfectly, and we don't. What we do is enough to meet everybody's needs.
Great, thank you. I do want to just take this one moment for the attendees who aren't here in attendance. Don't forget that you can ask any specific questions you may have for our three panelists in the Q&A. No need to be shy. We'll field those as they come in if you have any of them. If not, we'll keep going through our gambit of questions. But I did just want to remind everybody, in case you were so enraptured in what everyone was saying that you forgot about the Q&A, but it is there for you to use. In the meantime, so as you've been, in office, on the campaign trail, fielding things from residents, how did you develop your leadership skills, and did you have any major influences? I know Mary Beth Canty, you mentioned, looking up to Laura Murphy and others like her, but if there were any other influences as you've gone through your journey, and actually, if you wanted to kick us off, Representative Canty.
Yeah, happy to. I actually am very lucky in that my parents were both very civic minded. So my dad was in the Navy for 24 years, and then he ran a nonprofit after that. And he and my mom have always been involved in civic organizations everywhere that we've lived. So I have a long family history of trying to do more for the people around us. And I will just add, I saw a question pop up in the chat asking if you have to be in law to get involved. And the answer is no, you absolutely do not have to be in law to get involved. You absolutely do not. For me, it has been helpful, but there are so many people involved in both the House and the Senate and at the executive level that are not lawyers. They don't have that legal background. And I always think that they bring something different to the table. They bring a different perspective. And the same was true even when I was in law school itself, right? There was a track of kids that came through as pre-law students. And then there were the oddballs, right? Somebody who studied kinesiology or art or theater like me. And we didn't come from this big political background or a government background or a legal background. And you just bring a different flavor to the way that you look at the world. And I think we need that in all three of what I'll call the chambers. I know it's technically the two chambers and then the other branch, but I think you need that wide range of people. But I look up to people and always have looked up to people that are thinking about something that will last longer than they are around. Right? If you are thinking about the people that come behind you, if you're thinking about what will be here after you leave, I think your emotional connection and the care that you take lasts a lot longer. If you're only focused on you know, doing something that works for right now and you don't care what happens afterwards, that's where we start to see policies go a little bit awry. And I don't think those people have as much success in the long run.
Great, thank you. Senator Laura Murphy, if you want to add to your influence.
Sure. First, I'll start with, I am not a lawyer. I was going to go to law school and I did not like it at all. So you can do this without, I spent my career in healthcare, in the business end of healthcare. So you do not have to be a lawyer. And as Representative Canty said, we do need all those different perspectives and life experiences when we're negotiating bills, we're making policies. So that's really important. As far as, I think that we all can identify a mentor that has helped us along the way. And you know, locally, I think what I did was I listened to people all the time afterwards. And what I found to be the most important thing in local government, and the same here, is you have to build relationships with people outside of the office. You have to go out for dinner. You have to go and have coffee, because that's where you're able to have a really good full exchange of ideas. And that's where mentorship really occurs. You get to know each other as individuals, and you develop a level of respect that you're able then to negotiate policy and to have differences of opinion, but still maintain that respect for an individual because you've gotten to know them. And so it's easy to develop mentorships. And I think down here, and women try to mentor other women because we understand where we've all come from, just an inherent ingrained sense of where we're from and how we know barriers that people might have and how we can help them through that. So everybody, all the women, I would say, in the Senate, and I know also in the House, tend to reach out and help each other.
That's great, thank you. And then Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, if you want to add to that as well.
Well, why do I have to defend myself for being a lawyer now? So in my defense, I was a piano performance major. That was my bachelor's degree. So there, all you need is that fire in your belly. But it's true. A lot of lawyers go into running for office, but we do need a diversity of backgrounds at the table, correct? So I completely agree with that. And I think all you need is that fire in your belly. Now, as far as my influencers, my main influencer was a woman that did not get a GED or a high school diploma. She was my mom, and she was from Fidel Castro's Cuba. And my family, my dad was from Ecuador, my mom was from Cuba. They were newly arrived, and my first language was Spanish. And so all the odds were against us. My mom had had me when she was just 15 years of age, but she was my influencer because anytime she spoke, it was so beautiful. She'd tell me things like, Evelyn, en este país tú vas a subir como la espuma. In this country, you will rise like the foam. And I believed her stories about freedom, her stories about access and opportunity, and being first generation in this country. I just feel like she taught me more than any Juris Doctorate or any sort of high-level educated individual in the world. And she was the one that influenced me going forward. I had a lot of changes in my professional life. After I served as lieutenant governor, I have to say that another big influencer, you guys, hold on. Another big influencer is my favorite buddy, LaShawn Ford. And him and I, mind you, I'm a Republican. He's a Democrat. And afterwards, I was working in a fair housing center, and I reached out to him as a Democrat and asked him to please carry a bill that would outlaw source of income discrimination. And we did that together. And that is something I will never forget. And so I think that my mom, he's going to creep out with this. And then LaShawn Ford as my two main influencers.
No, that's great. No, influence comes from everywhere. That's fantastic. Excellent. And thank you, Denise, for your question about law. Really appreciate that. We do have another attendee question. Oh, more general. So we hear that sending letters, emails to our legislators makes a difference, but does it really? If you all want to touch on that, Senator Murphy, if you want to start there.
Oh, sure. I would say absolutely it makes a difference because when we hear from constituents, then we have a better idea of what their feeling is. And if they don't send us that, we don't always know. And so it is integral to our decision making. And then even besides sending a letter, we have a process of filing a witness slip. Those two, in that's a process before a bill is heard in committee. A witness slip is filed, and you're either going to be a proponent or an opponent. And every single legislator looks at those before discussion on a bill occurs. It's announced into the official record. And so that too is another way to make sure your voice is heard. But absolutely, letters, emails, phone calls, however you choose to communicate. I know that it makes a huge difference. It makes a huge difference. And we do, I follow the philosophy that I'm here to represent my constituency. If there's times that we don't agree, if I can't convince them of why an issue is the same way, and I don't have a visceral disagreement with that. I usually follow their lead. We're able usually to come to some agreement, to some compromise, and you can't do that if you've never reached out. So it's really important to reach out to legislators in any format.
That's great. Thank you. Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, do you want to add to that? I was well put, but
so as lieutenant governor, I was not a legislator, but I do agree that writing letters, sending emails, conducting a grassroots effort at every level, because you're a stakeholder and you have a place at the table and your opinions matter. And so I remember that when the former governor had assigned me to guide the state's opioid epidemic task force to trying to cut down on all of those deaths, I knew that it took every single person out there. It took the victims, those moms that walked in to find their children perish due to this epidemic. It took the coroner's offices from all over the state. It took police. It took all of these different units. So absolutely, yes, writing letters, you are a stakeholder, and we need people at every single level to discuss issues that are important to them. And I will tell you firsthand that we all listen.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. And Representative Canty, if you want to add to that as well.
Yeah, I was just going to say, we absolutely do take all of those into account. And I always try to let people know you don't need to be the most well-versed on an issue. I think sometimes people get intimidated. They think they can't write in until they've done a ton of research and can cite to different things. And I don't care about any of that because I will ask the experts. I will find the citations. What I want to know is how my constituents feel about an issue. So if all you have time to do is send a one-sentence email that says, I am in favor of X thing, or I am not in favor of Y thing, and all you want to add to it is just your personal feelings on it, I will take that into account. I also pay a lot of attention to people who take the time to do something individually as opposed to a form letter where all they have to do is sign their name. And I see Senator Murphy shaking her head, right? Because it shows that this person really cares, right? Even if it was just a few extra seconds or a couple extra minutes to take the time to draft it in their own words, that tells me that they feel really strongly about it because so many people don't take the time. So it's easy to click a button, and we do pay attention to those. They go into our tracker, but I always take special care with people who take the time to write in or call in individually, however they do it. And again, you don't have to be the foremost expert in the issue. You just have to care about the issue.
Great, thank you. No, that's very, very, very thorough responses. Thank you very much. And thank you to the question asker for submitting that as well. So just on, we do have about 10-ish minutes left. So we've got room for more questions if anybody else wants to submit any. We do have more questions on the docket as well. So we'll keep kind of going through that. But so you guys touched a little bit on recruitment and reaching out to folks, but how do you see, women supporting other women in politics, and what would you like to see, or what are things that you've taken on personally? I know we've gone over some of it in light detail, but if you wanted to elaborate more on that, and Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, if you want to start.
Well, the mere fact that we're here tonight shows that we truly believe in this, because the weather's so nice outside and my husband's doing barbecue. But so woman supporting woman is a big deal, because getting started on city council, I remember going door to door, and I had a neighbor come to the door, and I said, my name is Evelyn Sanguinetti. I want to be your councilwoman. Let's talk about, government and what motivates you. And the question was, well, what do you do? And I said, well, I'm a neighbor. I church with you. No, what do you do? And then I said, and I also have 3 kids. Your kids play with my kids. And yes, I'm an attorney and I teach law too. And she said, well, it seems like you have too much on your plate. This was when I was on city council. And so I think my first piece of advice, as far as women supporting women, is really, really let your sisters get ahead, reach back and lift those women that want to run for office. If you've made it, lift them so that you could all make it. But that was my first experience. And it stung me so bad that I've always been part of these groups, these women leaderships groups, the Center for Advancement of Women in Politics through Rutgers University, and putting your time in for studies that are constantly being conducted on the issues of daycare, which is something that we have the right to get while we're running for office, and so many other things. Put yourselves out there to be part of these research projects. There's also another group that I serve on their board. It's called the Ascend Fund, and it came about through Bill Gates' ex-wife, as well as Soros' ex-wife, and their mission is to abolish the gap that exists with women running for office as opposed to their male counterparts. So I think my suggestion is get out there and get involved, so that you could continue to fight for women, because we are still at a disadvantage.
Great, thank you. Senator Laura Murphy, if you want to add to that.
I think that if women don't continue to support women, the polarization that we're seeing in society is going to get even bigger. And I have faith that the women are going to pull this back together, because we just can't allow it. Because we know at the end of the day, there are certain things that have to be done. And we have to find a way to get it done. That's why women at the table are able to negotiate and to resolve the issue. And what we have to do is sometimes, as Lieutenant Governor said, is maybe bring some of those women along, even kicking and screaming, and hopefully, show them this is how we work. This is how we support each other, because maybe they never had that in their lives. And then I am going to skip ahead, if you don't mind, because there was a question about, were there any big surprises in Springfield? And I think that probably the biggest surprise is that when we have these wonderful ideas and we're going to make a huge difference in our district because this person has a problem, we're going to solve it. And then you find out that these people come out of the woodwork that are opposed to it. And you have to pick, and sometimes the smallest thing that you think is so not controversial becomes this it just blows into proportion, out of proportion, that everybody has an issue with it. And you have to negotiate with every single special interest group in order to basically educate them on what this actually does, the need for it. And sometimes that takes several years, which that was what I did not know. It might take me several years to get something that I think is pretty benign passed.
Yeah.
Great. Well, or not so great, but that's good to know. It's good to hear. Representative Canty, if you want to add to either, how you see women supporting other women in politics, or also any surprises that you saw when you got to Springfield, and has the experience played out as you thought it would?
Yeah, I can speak to both of those things. I've been pretty lucky in running for office in that the majority of people in leadership roles on my team have been women. And it hasn't been because I set a rule that I was going to only work with women. It's just these are the people that stepped up because I like to collect people around me that are really talented in their areas, and then I trust them to do what it is that they do best. So it's a place where you can come and shine, right? When you're working on my team, I rely on experts. So I do it in my legislation and I do it in every other part of my life as well. I would agree with Senator Murphy. One of the biggest surprises was thinking that I would be able to do the small stuff very easily, and the big stuff would be the stuff that would be very hard and would take me years. And I'm finding that the big stuff has actually been relatively straightforward. It's these small things that I'm finding there are hurdles to jump over and hoops to jump through that I just hadn't expected. The other thing I will say is the scheduling, because I'm a person who loves her calendar. I love things to be organized. If we say a meeting is going to start at 7, I want it to start at 7. And we get going, we get in, and we get out. And in Springfield, it's just not always possible to do that. And again, going back to what I said earlier, you have to be willing to pivot as things happen. A committee might go long, there might be more questions than you had anticipated. You've got a lot of people, a lot of moving parts all around. So you have to be somewhat flexible. So that was surprising. I'm in my second year here and I'm still getting used to that, but I think I'm getting better with it.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, if you also wanted to touch on any surprises that you found once you got into office or in Springfield and all of those specifics.
So the surprise I found was the difference between serving in local government as opposed to serving in state government. And I found that in local government, you find that you could make a difference quicker, right? And you could have an impact quicker. For instance, a big deal was using a parcel as a mixed use parcel for our parks and our local new Marianos. I was able to see that from beginning to end. Now, if you talk about statewide politics, or if you talk about federal politics, completely different. Those wheels of justice turn so slow, I cannot even tell you. So I think that's the biggest difference that shocked me. Local government versus state and federal government. Mm-hmm.
Gotcha. Thank you for that. And it looks like we've got one more audience question. This will be our last one, a good note to end on. Thank you, Denise, for this. What might be a first step to find out where I might fit in all of this? So Senator Laura Murphy, if you want to start on that.
Sure. I would say that you have local organizations, the league being a prime one that can help with that. But if you don't even feel, if you don't feel like you know anybody in that environment, reach out to any of us that are elected officials, and we can help you get connected with the right people. Because at the end of the day, it's all local. And you have to come back to that local structure of who you need to know to help you be successful. And we can all help you if you don't know who that person is.
Excellent. Great. Representative Canty, if you want to add to that.
I absolutely echo that. reach out to those around you. I'm lucky my state senator is Ann Gillespie, and she's amazing. But she started running for Senate at the same time that I decided I wanted to run for trustee. So I feel like we kind of came up together in certain ways. So reaching out and talking to people as you go, just having the courage to do that, even if all you do at first is ask them how their day is going and start building that relationship. But it'll be the best decision that you can make, is to just start going down that path.
Great, thank you. And then Lieutenant Governor Sanguinetti, any other additions to that?
Yeah, on how to get started. So I'm like example number one, because I was a person that felt that government was not working for me, and that's why I had this awful accident. So I wasn't really part of my community. I was impacted by my community, and so I needed to get started in very different levels, right? And so the way I got started was reaching out to my township government, becoming part of my PTA, and reaching out to more of my brothers and sisters in church. There are so many areas where you could reach out and be in touch with the community. But those were the areas where I got started in, because I kind of went at it having been impacted by government without having been part of it first.
Excellent. Thank you so much. And thank you again, everybody, for all of your time today. It's appreciated. I'm going to pass this over to Terry as we're closing out our Q&A session. Thank you guys. You did a great job. I'll pass this over to Terry Gazowski, our league member, and then also the League of Women Voters Palatine President, Kathy Cortez.
Let me just say, this was so interesting, and we're looking forward to making this recording available and to inspire all of our community to step up and join Denise, right, in taking those first steps. That's all. I'm very excited about what we heard tonight. And then, yeah, Kathy, I know you've got some good words to say as our league president, and we'll let you close it out.
Well, thanks. I will do that. I do want to share that I feel a connection with all of you, starting with knowing that someone with a healthcare business background like myself actually might have a shot. So thank you, Laura. Couple of housing advocates, right? You both probably know that I'm very interested in that area. So it's great to have a couple of those relationships here as well. And Evelyn, it sounds like you might be serving on the board with my old college roommate. So, it's a very small world, and it really does point to how local all connections in politics are. So thank you so much for sharing your stories with us and your time during what I know is a ridiculously busy schedule. But I think one of my favorite parts of the evening was to learn that some of you either very much support the league's mission or are part of the league yourselves. And so I do want to make a point of inviting people today who are on the call, who are listening to your stories, to join in on the fun. We do obviously much more than voting. We do these kind of educational events, and we're very passionate about advocacy as well, and really loved to hear that you are confirming that, boy, by all means, you want to hear from us, right? And so thank you once again for that. And Terry, I think you put the league website information in the chat, right? So for those of you who have an interest in looking at what Palatine's doing a little bit more and possibly joining us, please go out there and hit the join button. Thanks again, everybody.
And we'll see you at the next series.
Thank you so much, everyone. Good night.